Hello, everybody, and welcome today to our webinar featuring our friends at Ohio University to talk about campus and community and some of the work that they've done to leverage those partnerships to better serve and prevent sexual violence in their community down there. Some quick housekeeping things before we get started. If you can mute your phone or your computer to prevent background noise, that would be great because we are planning to record this webinar today. That eliminates any noise that might disrupt the presentation, but it also keeps whatever's going on in your area private. In addition to that, I would just ask that if you have a cell phone or anything, any other electronic device that you're working with during the presentation, to keep it away from your phone or your computer, however you're listening in. We have had some problems with some previous webinars this summer with that creating some feedback, again, disrupting the presentation and whatnot. So thank you in advance for doing that. During the presentation, if you have questions for our presenters, I really encourage you to enter those into the chat room that you can see on your display there. You can send the question to everybody, or you can send it directly to me, Carrie Solar, and I will relay it to the team at the end when they pause for questions, or if there's something really pressing as they're presenting in a section, I will flag them and let them know of the question. But either way, we will get those questions to our presenters today. So without any further ado, I want to introduce to you our friends from Ohio University, Jessica Cook, Matt Hall, and Kimberly Castor. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Hi, thank you so much, Carrie. You'll see on our presentation there's actually a fourth presenter that is not with us today. That's Dr. Geneva Murray. She had a family emergency, but the good thing is that we all work so closely together that a lot of the content that Dr. Murray would be talking about is something that all of us have been involved in some way. The topic for today's webinar is, working together as a university and also working together within our community to help survivors of sexual violence and prevent sexual misconduct on our campuses. So the presenters today, we come from a variety of different offices on campus. I work in equity and civil rights compliance at Ohio University.
And this is Matt Hall, and I'm the Assistant Director of Health Promotion in our Campus Involvement Center. So I work in our Student Affairs Division here at Ohio University.
Hi, I'm Kim Castor. I am Director of Ohio University's Survivor Advocacy Program. So we are a campus-based advocacy program that provides supportive services to student survivors of sexual assault, dating violence, or stalking. And then Dr. Geneva Murray, who's the one that's not with us today, is the Director of our Women's Center here at Ohio University. And we wanted to start out just by talking a bit about the power of positive working relationships. And you can see a lot of pictures of us up here on the screen. Some of those were taken at work events, some of those were taken at each other's houses and that kind of thing. We were kind of set up in a unique position when we started our jobs because Jess and Geneva started right around the same time in 2015, and then Matt and myself both started in the summer of 2016. So all four of us began our jobs right around the same time and went through new employee orientation together, went through our divisions orientations together. I know on Matt's first day at his job, my boss introduced us and said, you guys are going to have to be good friends. So here I'm putting together this introduction now. And, luckily for all of us, we did turn out to be good friends, both at work and outside of work. A lot of the pictures that you see up here were taken either during events that all of us planned together or as we were planning events, so during planning meetings and that sort of thing. So we really just see the value of a positive working relationship amongst those of us here on campus.
So today we're going to talk to you about two different sides of the prevention work and addressing misconduct on our campuses. The first being university programs and initiatives. And obviously the presenters today were all employees of Ohio University, and it's so important that we foster strong relationships and work together on misconduct prevention. And then the second part is how we are coordinating and communicating with the larger community about not only sexual assault and sexual violence prevention in our communities, but also how they can serve our students better, how they can participate in things that are happening on our campuses that sort of thing.
So the first thing we wanted to talk about in regards to Ohio University specifically is our investment in confidential resources. So confidential resources are essentially offices or staff members that are not required to report incidents that they're made aware of to the Office of Equity and Civil Rights Compliance or any other investigating body, so law enforcement and that sort of thing. And at Ohio University, we're lucky to have 4 different offices that are designated as university confidential resources. And those will be on the next slide here. And the way that we break that down here at OU is essentially these are all of the offices that have licensed professionals working in them. So the Survivor Advocacy Program where I work is kind of, again, outlined on this next slide, but we have myself and 2 advocates. All 3 of us have our master's degree in social work and are licensed through our Counselor and Social Work Board here in Ohio. So what that means is that in addition to the confidentiality that we have through the university where we don't have to report to Title IX, we also have privileged communication with our clients. So our notes, our interaction with clients and that sort of thing aren't going to be pulled into court during a trial or anything along those lines because we do have that privileged communication. And that's going to be the same with all of the other confidential resources that we discussed. Carrie, okay, there we go.
I want to talk to you briefly about the second confidential resources, which is counseling and psychological services. And the reason that we're kind of running through these really quickly is because it is important for the university community to know that there are confidential resources on campus. And for all of the prevention workers or the people dealing with the adjudication to be able to share that information with people who are going through the university process or who are survivors and seeking resources. And so counseling and psychological services is only available to students at Ohio University. Every time I do a resources and options meeting with a student survivor, I talk about CPS and how that we can help them to get into CPS for a counseling appointment if they'd like. There are also drop-in hours for our students to drop in at CPS and have counseling. And this information is just shared within our community very openly. Better Bystanders provides those resources. Kim, when she does presentations, also shares information about CPS. And certainly the Equity and Civil Rights Office, we always share information about CPS with our students who are going through the process.
Our next resource is our Campus Care Office or our Student Health Center, and we work with them closely in a variety of ways. And what I'll say is that we're lucky to have both an on-campus Student Health Center with Campus Care, but we're also lucky to have a hospital, right next to campus as well. So while Campus Care, for example, does not provide stain exams, our hospital, O'Bleness Memorial Hospital, does. And so oftentimes we are working in tandem between those 2 bodies to make sure that our students, and in this case survivors particularly, are getting the resources that they need. And we do oftentimes partner with the doctors in their family clinic from the sexual health perspective, especially. And it's certainly my philosophy that robust sexual health programming is one sort of element of comprehensive prevention education, which I'm sure many of you would agree with. And so they do STI screenings regularly, but also as part of follow-up for someone who may have experienced sexual assault. They sit on a committee with health promotion, my office, as well as folks in our our Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine to address sexual health on campus, examining trends and looking at assessments so that we can better serve the sexual health needs of our students going forward, in addition to their regular visits and other health needs as well. But they're one of our 4 confidential resources here on campus.
And our last confidential resource is the Psychology and Social Work Clinic. And this is a clinic that is supported through Ohio University's Psychology Department. And it's a clinical training site for psychology and social work graduate students who are working as clinicians in the field. And this is one of the offices on campus that also serves community members. So a lot of families and staff and community members in our area can use this resource as well. And they do a variety of services, as you can see listed here on the screen, including individual and group therapy. So if a student is working, for example, at the counseling center doing clinical training there, and they'd rather not go there for services, they can go to the psych and social work clinic for their own personal services as well to avoid any kind of conflict in that way. Or if they just prefer that location over another, then they're able to do that as well.
All right, moving on, we can look at some of our campus partners a little bit and some of the other programming that's happening to give you an idea of how we're plugging things in here at Ohio University. And one of the partners that we want to highlight is actually transportation, which may or may not be at the table for conversations at your institution. But we find them to be particularly important these days as we're talking about our students either walking home safely or getting home safely. And we have had a CATS late night service for some time. In fact, Kim and I both present a Bobcat basic session at our orientation program over the summer, and we tell our students and parents, get out your phones, take down this number, and use it frequently. And the number for our CATS late night program is actually right on the back of their student IDs, which I think is great. It's a constant reminder that they have a safe way to get home. And we like it because they can call in advance and set up a ride home, or they can call them in the moment and set up a ride home. And we've had recent conversations on our campus about how to effectively expand service. So we're looking at expansion of hours, expansion of days in which service is provided. So we've just added Sunday services, for example. And the CATS Late Night also provides transportation up to 2 miles off campus, which is great. And what we're looking for this year is to think about how we are training staff that works with our CATS Late Night program. So Kim, Dr. Murray, and myself will be working with our transportation staff to examine things like rape culture, like empathic response, understanding what it might look like to pick up someone who has been assaulted, to understand how to effectively intervene if something were to happen, on the shuttle itself. So we're going to be looking at that sort of staff training element this year to further enrich our conversation about transportation options.
We're also looking at ways to expand training for all of our employees here on campus and our students. And one thing that we wanted to talk about was our Bobcat student orientation that all students are required to complete prior to beginning in their first semester of their first year here on campus. And one of the sessions in Bobcat student orientation is called Expectations and Opportunities. And this is where our Dean of Students, Jenny Hall-Jones, gets on stage and talks to the students specifically about what we as a university expect of them as students. She talks about the code of conduct and how the code of conduct follows them and their behaviors, regardless of whether they're on campus or on spring break or back home for a weekend. They are still a Bobcat, and we have certain expectations of them. And part of this is a very frank discussion on consent and on the definition of consent that we use here at Ohio University. She talks to the students about consent using an analogy of pizza and ordering pizza. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure if you emailed her, she could send you a YouTube link so you can kind of hear that, because it's something that our students really remember. And, any student that you go to, during their first year or even after that, and just say, hey, tell me about that pizza talk that you heard. They know exactly what you're referring to. So from the time that they come here for orientation, before they're even beginning classes, we're talking to them about consent and what happens if they violate that in regards to our student code of conduct and our Title IX process. She also outlines the resources on campus, so they see our big smiling faces on the big screen right there at orientation of who they can go to for resources around this topic. And if they're coming to campus as a survivor already, that they can go to a variety of resources here on campus for that support as they go through the transition to college.
I think we're actually lucky enough to have Dr. Jenny Hall-Jones on the call, and so thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Hall-Jones.
All right, next up, we have the Choices program, which is a program that is peer facilitated, and we have a fairly robust history of peer education in the Health Promotion Office in the Campus Involvement Center, and they really are a crucial extension of the work that we do, and I know many schools on the call probably do have peer health educators doing this work. About 98% of our first-year students do take part in the Learning Communities program, meaning that they are in a cohort-based model throughout their first semester. And we're lucky to have that partnership with our University College and our Learning Programs program. But this program overviews alcohol safety, bystander intervention, consent, and provides some skills-based practice to explore the barriers to intervention and how we can effectively intervene in situations not only pertaining to sexual assault, but perhaps alcohol overdose, where effective intervention could help someone avoid harm. And this does take place in the first, I would say, 6 to 12 weeks of the semester, just depending on where they fall. Since we have about 4,100 first-year students going through the Choices program, we do 10 programs a night, 4 nights a week. And so it takes a bit of time to get all of those first-year students through the program. But we do have that really effective peer education program to support our work.
In addition to training students, one of the most important prevention techniques for our college community is also to allow our employees to know what the rules are around sexual misconduct, what the expectations of our employees are when they receive a report of sexual misconduct, and the general standards of behavior in our community and what's acceptable and not acceptable at Ohio University. And so for many years, my office, Equity and Civil Rights Compliance, had developed kind of in-house training, and we would train new employees. We would go and train divisions or departments who sought training, but we saw that there were some real gaps. We weren't reaching everyone. And so there were a lot of strategic discussions about how do we make sure that all of our employees have a baseline knowledge about sexual misconduct and what they have to do if there is a disclosure of sexual misconduct. And so we decided to seek out EverFi and use the Bridges program, which is a faculty and staff training module. It's a great training program. All of our employees, we had to work with our human resources office and get lists of active employees, push those out to our employees. The president was really instrumental in sending out communications saying that he expected every 100% training rate. And so he expected every single one of our employees to take this training. And man, it was very effective. A lot of people were they hadn't been trained in years. And we were just surprised at the reception to that training program, and it's been very effective. And we're going to be pushing out additional training this year as well. In addition to Bridges, I personally do an in-person training with all new employees at our human resources orientation, and that occurs about every 4 to 6 weeks. And so, training students is one thing, but training our employees is also another very important component to this.
Mm-hmm. And this is Kim. One question that I get asked a lot is, how do I, as a mandated reporter, support a student that discloses a sexual assault or an instance of interpersonal violence to me? And the Bridges module had a really good kind of role play video skit that walked employees through that process and gave them examples of how to support a student that discloses to them while also letting them know that they are a mandated reporter. So that was something that we in Survivor Advocacy Program really appreciated about that module. It wasn't just talking about the employees' policy expectations, but it also gave them tangible skills to support survivors.
Mm-hmm. And to build on that, our students also are looking at several online modules throughout their time at Ohio University. We have a fairly long history of using the EverFi programs here at OU. We started with Alcohol EDU many years ago and introduced Haven, which concerns sexual assault, consent, and bystander intervention about 4 years ago. So all of our current students have taken both modules. And we just started this summer to introduce a sort of scaffolded junior year online module, which is like a 2.0 or booster session, so that we can help to reinforce these concepts as our students are beginning to move off campus. We're also piloting a similar program for our graduate students and what that looks like for them as students at Ohio University, which we know is, of course, very different than our first-year students. We have, of course, to have important relationships to help support this programming, and I would highlight the registrar, particularly in supporting the online modules. Our reminders go out, and we have deadlines, but without the registrar, working with us to place holds, for example, on academic accounts, we wouldn't necessarily have that same sort of structural enforcement, which really does get people engaged, and part of that is a bit of a mandate, but we know that more of our students are now completing it because we do have the ability to place academic holds. And then we also have the EverFi program for our student athletes, which is also run by our ECRC office. In addition, though, outside of our EverFi modules, we are collecting a variety of other forms of data and information. We do a Healthy Campus survey every year. We are collecting information about our town gown relationships and how we can improve those using the health and well-being information that is collected in our town gown survey. So all of this data then drives the conversation and shifts our focus where appropriate.
So just another component, and I know that, all of the offices here do training and prevention work, but also the Women's Center offers in-person prevention and education, including programming that discusses rape myths. Dr. Murray is very passionate about talking about some of the myths around rape and sexual assault. And we have an event that we'll talk about later that was the What You Were Wearing exhibit, which really confronts some of those myths directly. And so a lot of different places on our campus are involved in this work. We're all working together, and it would not be effective if we were not all working together to try to do this good programming. So another university initiative that we have found is truly important to addressing sexual misconduct on our campus is having a forum to talk about these issues as a university community. So the way that we do that is through the Presidential Advisory Council on Sexual Misconduct, or as we call it, PACSM. PACSM is comprised of students, faculty, staff. We have key administrators, such as the Title IX coordinator, the dean of students. The prevention folks are all on that, and also police officers, essentially anyone that really touches the key players in the sexual misconduct prevention work and the adjudication work are on PACSM. And we review protocols, we look at university policies, we talk about the big picture in terms of our prevention programming. Do we have any gaps? How do we fill those gaps? Are we addressing the needs of our community? We talk about victim advocacy, and are we addressing the needs of survivors on our campus? Risk reduction. We do the campus climate assessment. Now, I know that that's a mandate, and we do the ODHE campus climate survey, but also OU has an independent survey that they want to expand and find some additional information. So PACSM is our institutionalized committee to deal with those sort of issues, and we meet probably around once a month. The subcommittees might meet depending upon a need. And so Dr. Jenny Hall-Jones and our Title IX coordinator, Dr. Jones is the dean of students, and the Title IX coordinator at Ohio University is Carrie Griffin, and they co-chair the PACSM committee.
And one initiative that we in Survivor Advocacy Program have been talking about for a couple of years is the Nazca Culture of Respect Collaborative. And I've been really kind of championing, I can't speak today, but you know what I'm trying to say, this collective, saying that I think this is something that could really benefit our campus to help us move forward, help us identify any blind spots that we might have. And so this year in PACSM, we discussed it and decided that PACSM would be a good place to kind of house that program as we move forward with applying for the collective and doing the work that entails. So it's essentially a 2-year program, and again, it's operated through NASPA. And the first year, essentially, they help you assess what you're already doing and then make a plan for how to move that work forward in the second year. And so we thought that PACSM was a good committee to house this because it is a presidential appointed committee, and all of the key players have a stake in this meeting that we have each month. So we're already meeting together. Everyone's already on board with this committee. So we're going to be moving forward with this culture of respect collaborative, hopefully in January, I would say. So we're excited to see kind of what outcomes we have from that initiative.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the prevention subcommittee, as Jessica already mentioned, we're doing a couple of things. We're plotting out what's happening, and we're going to talk about that more in just a second. And we are looking to see where those gaps are. But what our current focus is for the year is thinking about sort of institutionalization or strategic planning for prevention work. And so, for example, we met just last Friday to think about 3 short-term and long-term goals, and what does that look like for individual constituencies in our undergraduate student senate, our graduate student senate, our medical school, our police force, our survivor advocacy folks, and our administrative folks. So a wide spectrum of perspective, essentially, so that we can then identify common themes and boil them down to create concrete plans. What are some misperceptions that we need to address, and then address them? And so that's sort of how we're approaching things.
So one of the new initiatives that we have started within the last year actually is now housed in the PACSM committee, but it started with a senior leadership development program at Ohio University. And Kim Castor, Geneva Murray, and I were all on that senior leadership development cohort. And we were trying to strategically look at the way that Ohio University was tracking our prevention efforts and how we were communicating about our prevention efforts. And so that cohort proposed that we start having stakeholder meetings. And PACSM, is the largest committee for us to discuss a lot of stuff about sexual misconduct and look at it from a macro level. The stakeholder meetings are really more of a micro level, talking about the timing of programming. Okay, so Matt's office has a program scheduled for the second week in October, and it's a pretty big program. The other offices need to know that so that they don't plan programming on the same topic at that same time, and so that our members of our community are not pulled to one program or the other. And so the stakeholder meetings really are for the people who are doing the prevention work to discuss what in the next academic year is happening, what programs they are planning, and also any larger climate issues, like are we reaching the regional campuses of Ohio University? Who has programs planned on the regional campuses? Is there a way to collaborate on those programs? And it's really kind of a subgroup of PACSM who is hosting those stakeholder meetings and having these conversations with those prevention players.
Mm-hmm. And so, Carrie, if you want to move one forward, it's a fairly easy process, and we're attempting really just to have a good sense of what's going on at any given time, so that we do have a long-term, year-long narrative about the prevention work that's being done, the response work that's being done, the training, the programming, the education opportunities. And so we are all on the back end putting a central calendar together to track attendance, learning outcomes, attendance, audience, that sort of thing. But on the front face, we're also making sure that every event that is open to the public goes onto the university calendar, so that if you go to the university calendar at any given time, you can find any program that's being put on that touches the idea of sexual assault or prevention in any way, rather than having to go to the health promotion website or the Women's Center website or the ECRC website. Really easy things just to make it all central and live in one place, so that our students don't have to work to find things that they are looking for anyway.
And for the purposes of using this centralized calendar, we have the Outlook mail system at Ohio University, and we were trying to figure out a way, because there are so many different offices doing prevention work, we were trying to figure out a way that we could track it, and it wouldn't be too burdensome upon people to track programming and training sessions. And so we just developed a system where people are expected anytime that they do training or prevention work to, in their calendar invite, send a calendar invite to title9events@ohio.edu, and that's our central calendar for this prevention work. And, you know, Matt's office has things that are submitted to the calendar. My office has things, and it's great because, especially for like Clery purposes, for campus climate purposes, we can see exactly what's going on from all of the different offices.
And now we're going to move forward and talk about some of the other programming that we've done on campus. In about late 2016, early 2017, Geneva and Matt and myself kind of made a commitment to each other and to the larger campus that we were going to make it our goal to have one large-scale program each year that was an arts-based program that would bring in survivors' voices and survivors' perspectives to assist with the prevention programming that's already happening here on campus. And so in October of 2017, our first big program happened, and that was the monument quilt, and we do have a picture of that on the next slide that you can see. And the monument quilt is essentially a bunch of large quilt squares that are made from survivors throughout the country that are stitched together to form, as you can see, the phrase "not alone." And we were the first university to be able to show the quilt in full at our campus football stadium. So we were really excited about that because the other spaces on campus that we could have hosted it would have been great as well, but we wouldn't have been able to show the quilt in its full form like we did by using the football stadium. And so for this, to pull this program off, it took at least 9 or 10 months of planning and then a lot of crisis management about the day before when we found out that we needed a couple thousand either weights or bricks or something to hold the squares down because of wind. We had talked to the organizers that were bringing the quilt beforehand and didn't think this was going to be an issue with the space that we chose. But then I think the day or two before they said, just kidding, you need to have this so that the quilt squares don't run away. So actually what happened was we were in our student center having lunch kind of discussing what we were going to do. I ran over in a panic to a table of fellow Division of Student Affairs directors and told them what was going on, and our director of event services was like, hey, I know where you can get 2,000 bricks. And essentially in a couple of hours, he had them delivered to the football stadium and helped us pull off this event that otherwise, without that person and their help and their expertise in this, we wouldn't have been able to pull off. And this was a one-day event, so it was on display in our football stadium throughout the day. We had about, I think, 60 volunteers that helped us starting at 5 or 6 in the morning, all the way through 9 or 10 at night when we had to take it down. And we had speakers throughout the day that included parents of survivors, survivors themselves, administrators. Our president was there. I think his in-laws were there with him viewing the quilt. So it was a great university and community-wide effort. And I know that in survivor advocacy, we had a lot of clients come to us and say how great it was that they could be in a space with their professors and their friends and their RAs and feel supported and talk about what happened to them, because our Title IX office granted a mandated reporting exemption for this event so that people could be there and tell their stories and create squares to contribute to this traveling monument and not feel concerned about that having to be reported, because we did have this exemption. And they said, you know, that was one of the first times that they were able to talk to their, you know, RA about what had happened to them without having that fear. So that was a really great event.
And throughout the day, you can actually see this in the top of the picture where it says Ohio. There's a sort of a blob of people there, and that is actually our Quiltmaking Station. So throughout the day and throughout the year, we had Ohio University in Athens faculty, staff, students, and community members actively creating quilt squares. So over the course of the year, we probably contributed about 40 quilt squares to the national exhibit, which is an amazing contribution and speaks to the commitment and the importance of emphasizing our survivor stories in our community. And while we had agreed to this arts-based approach each fall, what we were not necessarily anticipating was the level of appreciation from across our community about the amplification of survivor stories. Certainly we felt this was important, but over and over and over again in our evaluations from the day's event, we heard, yes, this is an amazing event. Yes, we loved hearing all of the resources available on campus, but the big thing was it was so important to me to hear another survivor speak to complement my own experience, or I never thought about the experience of a survivor as a non-survivor, and it's changed my perspective, and now I will more actively intervene in situations where I myself could prevent harm. But it was the survivor stories that really prompted us to think about what to do next.
And this event was open to the community as well, and I know that we had a lot of people from the community come in and view it. Additionally, our prosecutor's office, the advocacy folks there came over for the event, and it's something that, I mean, it was such a large-scale event that it would not have been able to have been pulled off by just one office. It really required a lot of effort, and again, it goes back to those positive working relationships within your campus community.
And so while this event was happening and the publicity was going on about this event, the What Were You Wearing exhibit at the University of Kansas went viral right around the same time. And we had a lot of students coming to us saying, hey, can we do this here? Can you bring this exhibit to Ohio University? So, I had clients telling me that in survivor advocacy. Dr. Murray had people coming into the Women's Center asking her about this exhibit. So what we decided to do was, yes, we can do a What Were You Wearing exhibit, but we want to do an Ohio University specific one. We want submissions from our campus and from our community for our exhibit. So that, I believe it was like within a week of the Monument Quilt ending last October that we had our first planning meeting for the What Were You Wearing exhibit. And so we had this exhibit during, I believe it started August 30th to September 17th or something along those lines, about the first 3-ish weeks of fall semester this year. And we purposely planned it during that time because we know that if we would have waited until October or November or even spring semester, it would have been a lot easier for us just because of the timing. But we knew that that's when this exhibit needed to happen because of the red zone and the high number of sexual assaults that occur on college campuses throughout the nation during the first several weeks of fall semester. So we purposely planned it during that time. And for this exhibit, we worked with the College of Fine Arts to secure a location in our student center where we could have it on display. And Dr. Murray worked with a lot of different stakeholders throughout campus to make the exhibit as accessible as possible for a variety of people who wish to attend. So we had audio recordings of the description. So in one of the pictures, I think we already passed it, but you could see the description that people submitted with their clothing. So we had audio recordings of those. We also had Braille printed out beside each submission so people could view it in that way. And we had submissions from students and community members throughout our area, which we were really excited about. And we also had about 1,600 or more people came through the exhibit during those weeks that it was on display to view the exhibit. I know I was seeing tons of social media posts from random Facebook friends that I had that were not connected to the university in any way, but they had heard about this exhibit and came to view it and found it to be really impactful for them. And then one thing that we did as part of that exhibit was a panel discussion, and you can see, I think it's kind of, no, it's not talked about in that blurb, but we had a panel discussion as part of this where people could submit questions that they had that they might not be comfortable asking in front of a large audience, and the panelists would answer those. And we had panelists from the prosecutor's office, administrators here on campus. We had a representative from Bravo. We had someone from Ohio State. I don't know if I'm missing anybody else. We had our local law enforcement on the panel. And that was a really great way of having everyone there in the same place where participants could ask questions that they had been wanting to know, either about the exhibit or just about sexual assault and interpersonal violence in general. And Matt, do you want to talk about the social media post that went viral?
Yeah, so we were really pleased and lucky that our exhibit caught on social media. And there was a student that none of us knew who just tweeted about the exhibit. And we all wished he was one of our volunteers or employees because it did sort of blow up. And we were getting responses from Canada, from California, as far away as the United Kingdom. And so we were really pleased with the positive reception that the gallery garnered here on campus. And we're very lucky now it's on sort of a traveling roadshow. It's currently at our Lancaster, Ohio campus, but it's going to go on a bit of a roadshow this year so that our regional students, faculty, and staff can also experience the exhibit as well. We actually just set that up in Lancaster Wednesday of last week.
And so another large-scale event that Ohio University has really expanded in the last couple years is Take Back the Night. And Take Back the Night is a familiar program on many college campuses, and everyone, does their own kind of different programming and that sort of thing. But Dr. Murray in our Women's Center last year took over for planning Take Back the Night, and we had these large-scale meetings with members of the university community, but also members of the Athens County community at large and our regional community to talk about programming and speakers for Take Back the Night and what our walk would look like and accessibility for people who had difficulty walking and planning a route that would be accessible for everyone who wanted to participate. We had a lot of different speakers for the Take Back the Night event who addressed a lot of different perspectives for sexual assault survivors. So this was a great program. It's something that we had a very positive reception for. Dr. Murray was really visionary in how she transformed Take Back the Night at Ohio University and created just this huge event. And that's another one of the programs we've had a lot of success with.
One more that we wanted to talk about was our Start by Believing campaign. So Start by Believing is an initiative that was began through an organization called End Violence Against Women International. And essentially, they talk about the importance of believing survivors when they say that something happened to them and that you should start by believing. And it's especially prominent in law enforcement. So when I first began, our chief of police came to me and said, hey, I heard about this Start by Believing campaign at this conference I was at, and I think we should do it. And I was like, hey, it's my second week on the job, so let me figure out my job first, and then we can talk about it. So about the next year or so, I went to him and said, okay, I'm ready to start talking about this campaign. And we in Survivor Advocacy have a student organization that's kind of an extension of our office that does programming and outreach and that sort of thing. And so they really wanted to be a part of this. And one of the students that were in the student org said, hey, I'm a survivor and I had a really great experience with law enforcement and with Survivor Advocacy, and I would love to be a part of this. So essentially what happened was that our Start by Believing campaign transformed into this collaboration between OUPD and Survivor Advocacy Program and our student survivor, Bree Civvy, where we had a kickoff in March, and we provided space for survivors to talk about times when they weren't believed and how that impacted them, and then gave space for Bree and Detective Austin from OUPD to talk about their work together on her sexual assault case that led her to really feeling believed and wanting to continue that collaboration with him. That moved forward into her perpetrator being prosecuted in December of last year. So we did that conversation again a couple of weeks ago in the beginning of October. And each time we've had, I think the first time we had a couple hundred people in the audience and had great feedback about how it was important for them to learn skills of how to support survivors in their life. And then we're going to be doing that conversation again at the End Violence Against Women International Conference in April so that people at the conference can see the skills that Detective Austin used without even realizing that he was using the Start by Believing approach because he hadn't heard of it at that time, but that's exactly what he was doing that kept Bree as a survivor wanting to work with him despite, a number of other things going on in her life, and that she would have much rather just been, going to class and being a normal college student and not having meetings with the police and the court and that sort of thing.
All right, and then the last large collaborative program that we want to talk about is called A Mile Together. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event that happens on a number of college campuses, which we used to have here as well. But starting in about 2015, we were having conversations about inclusivity, both around ability and about gender. If you're familiar with Athens, you know that our mile that we walked was bricks. Which is difficult for anybody, but particularly for those who may have a physical disability. So we wanted to rethink. And so in working with our accessibility folks here on campus and our campus partners, we came up with this idea of A Mile Together, which hopes to keep the original spirit of Walk a Mile in Her Shoes while also introducing concepts of gender inclusivity and bystander intervention. And so we have a large-scale awareness-raising event throughout the day. So rather than a one-time march that's done within an hour, we have about a 6-hour-long event in which our peer educators are providing bystander intervention skills and education to our attendees as they come to get resources. They get a free T-shirt. They can also meet our folks with Survivor Advocacy and the Women's Center and the police and the ECRC team so that they're putting faces to names when it comes to campus resources, but they're able to actively try out intervention techniques and then provide public demonstrations of support. So instead of a march down our Court Street, we have our students riding on the escalators in our university center for 6 hours as opposed to, half hour to build that awareness. But again, this is only done in conjunction with a lot of other people, and so I'm always very appreciative of that. And it complements the massive amount of peer education programming that happens throughout the year. We do about 150 bystander intervention workshops a year, depending on the semester, depending on the time of year. It's busier than others. So I do some of that, my graduate student does some of that, but a lot of it is done by our peer educators who officially host this sort of event.
And now we want to move forward to talking about our work with our community here in Athens. I mentioned earlier that I started my job in the summer of 2016, and one of the first things that my boss told me, other than you need to be friends with Matt, was you need to really focus on relationships, and relationship building is the most important piece to your job. And she said, I fully expect to see you out and about having coffee at 2 in the afternoon with key stakeholders. And I thought, wow, you mean I'm getting paid to go have coffee with people that I'm going to be working with? This is great. So I really took that advice and, worked to build relationships with stakeholders here in our community. I think the past couple of years, we've really seen a transformation in our community and the people that do this work because of all of our dedication to forming these relationships and seeing the work that other people do and appreciating the work that they do and the piece that they play into this, which has directly impacted our survivors in a positive way. Because if we're working in silos, we're not going to be nearly as effective as if we are working together on initiatives. So some of the things that we did in Survivor Advocacy program was going to hospital staff meetings and meeting with the nurses in the emergency room, going to their trainings when they're getting SANE certified there at the hospital, going and sitting through those trainings with them so we can have a newfound understanding and appreciation for all of the work that goes into performing a SANE exam. We would go up to the prosecutor's office and just have coffee with them or take them some coffee after we know that they finished a long trial or something along those lines. We sat through a sexual assault trial that wasn't one of our clients, but was, applicable to our work because we wanted to learn what that process was like and understand the types of evidence that's presented in something like that so that we could inform our survivors that we're working with, but also to show support to the prosecutor's office who are going through this really difficult task as part of their job. We would attend police briefings. So I know my staff were like, why the heck did you put a 6 a.m. meeting at the police office on my calendar and also an 11 o'clock one that same night? And that was because, there's different officers on each shift, and we wanted to make sure that each officer knew who we were and the work that we were doing, and we could answer any questions that they might have as part of that. And so one group that includes all of these different offices is what we call SARC, or our Sexual Assault Resource Collaborative. And you can see a list of the different offices that are included on there. And we've been meeting pretty much monthly for about the past 2 years since I've been in my position. And I would say our biggest success to date is, again, just the relationships with each other. I now know that I can call up, the police chief of either agency or the advocates at the prosecutor's office or the lead SANE nurse at the hospital if I have a concern or a question or need something from them. Whereas before this collaborative was really functioning in the way that it is now, I'm not sure that that would have been the case for all of us. And you can see the picture up there on the screen was from an award that we won, I believe last week or within the last couple of weeks. Somebody, I actually don't even know who nominated us, but somebody in the community nominated our group to receive a Group Hero Award through the Red Cross because of the work that everyone is doing individually and also together as a collaborative.
And having participated in some of those meetings, it's just really helped everyone involved in understanding what the other people in that room do as part of, responding to sexual assault in our community. There was a lot of discussion about sexual assault trials that occurred and things that we need to be cognizant of in getting survivors to the police as soon as possible if they do want to report to the police, and getting them to the hospital if they want a SANE kit done. And it's things that we know, but it just helped us communicate better about, keep this in mind, because from my perspective, this is what we need from your office.
And then we also have an office called the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program here in our community that also provides direct advocacy services to survivors. We at SAP serve student survivors, and then at SAOP, they serve community members or faculty and staff survivors. So our work looks similar, but the populations that we serve are different. But we really make it a point to support each other's programs and offices in any way that we can. And you can see the picture that's on the screen is from an event that they recently hosted called Turn the Towns Heal. That was in April. And they did a really great job of getting a lot of different community offices and businesses on board with decorating their windows or providing messages of support for survivors. And they invited, different OU offices to table and be a part of that event as well. And then the next slide it shows a resource that we provide to faculty and staff here on campus that outlines different community and campus resources. And a lot of people sometimes wonder why we're providing all of these community resources when we have all of this stuff on campus already. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but one is that they're not going to be students forever, so we need to make sure that they know that they're aware of the other resources, at least here in our community, that they can utilize. But also we know that faculty and staff might be impacted by these issues as well. We know that no one is immune when it comes to interpersonal violence, so we want to make sure that when we're providing resources, they know that there's resources out there for them as well, even if they aren't a registered student of Ohio University.
And it gives people more options. If they don't feel comfortable talking with somebody on campus, there are other organizations that they can utilize in our community.
So the last one is just thinking a little bit about the initiatives that are taking place almost independently of any of us within the community. And so a few things that we wanted to highlight are, first of all, our bars. We're a small college town with a fairly large number of bars right off campus. And over the summer, actually going back to last spring, we saw the bars reaching out to the university for things like sexual harassment training, bystander intervention training, how to think critically about what they may see as a bar employee and as a bystander, where they may not have intervened in the past but could do so in the future. And that has sort of snowballed this fall semester, where we have a lot more interest in that from a community perspective. We're also going to be meeting with a group of local nonprofits this week to discuss what training and programming options we can provide for our local nonprofit organizations. But what I have loved most of all is what we've seen from the student perspective. On the slide is just a variety of messages that has popped up this semester alone. In my bystander intervention programming, I talk all the time, and I'm sure this is a message you all recognize. When it comes to university administrators and educators, we can talk until we're blue in the face, but until the students begin to challenge each other to do better, to intervene more effectively, we're not going to see that culture change that we really desire. And I feel, are really beginning to see that take root in our student body this year in a way that hasn't in the past. And so all of these messages were from the last couple of weeks in which our Greek houses put up spontaneously messages of support for survivors, consent, and bystander intervention. We had well-placed members of our Student Senate, our Student Alumni Board, and our women's sorority chapters organize a large-scale rally in which they were really focusing on how they as students could drive the culture forward in a way that is productive and emphasizes supporting survivors and engaging in those effective bystander intervention techniques. So a lot of the work that we do, I think, really have seen take root in our student body this year in a way that we are enjoying.
We ran a little close on our time, but
sure did.
we like to talk about this work. So if anyone has questions, we would be more than happy to answer those now.
If you guys have questions, don't forget you can use the chat room on your screen to enter those questions, and our fearless presenters will be happy to answer those for you.
While we're waiting, I just want to say, you know, in some ways, the people who are doing this work kind of have to pour themselves out into this work. They really just have to, they give so much of themselves. And to see the students put up those banners about, you know, consent is mandatory and we support survivors and things like that, it just really is rewarding for the people who have contributed so much to trying to change the culture on our campuses. And it's something that we were not involved in, and it's really, it gives you a little bit of hope that what we're doing makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really shows the messages are soaking in, especially for the number and volume of programs you're doing. It just shows that, you know, the repeated efforts, the messages aren't getting lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're really trying to make it a point to have programs throughout the year and not just during, you know, the red zone and then again in April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We really want programs throughout the year. We have a program this Thursday. We're bringing Bev Gooden, who is the person who started the viral hashtag Why I Stayed in response to the Ray Rice and Janae Rice domestic violence scandal that went public. So she'll be on campus Thursday.
Any thoughts or notes for folks that are operating with limited budgets or much smaller staffs on smaller campuses in terms of building these community and campus partnerships that you've talked about today?
Well, I would venture to say all of our offices that are here do have limited budgets, and that is the beauty of working across campus and across community, and including a lot of different offices because they can help with that financial support, but also just bringing in a diversity of ideas and experiences to these programs. I wish Geneva was here because she is like a master fundraiser for programs like this.
From a sort of practical perspective, you know, my resources when it comes to prevention are very limited. And one of the best collaborations that I have is with our undergraduate student senate and our graduate student senate, who give generously from their budget to support our initiatives, and that may be similar on your campuses as well. Kim alluded to this, but finding the folks with the money is sometimes half the battle. So we reach out to faculty departments, whether they are expected or unexpected, to make all of this happen.
And I would say as well, be innovative in what you're doing, but if you see something that you think would be great for your campus, don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, if we talked about something today that you are interested in bringing to your campus, know that you have people at Ohio University that will gladly share information with you about these programs, and hopefully that would take a little bit of the burden off of inventing something from scratch.
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate your time today and sharing the great work you're doing down there at Ohio University and the relationships you've built to be so robust in your programming efforts and trying to change the culture down there. And thank you to all of you who were able to join us today. Like I said, there is a copy. I was able to record this webinar, so please feel free if you'd like a copy to share with others on your campus community, simply email me at ksolar@highered.ohio.gov, and I'll be happy to send it to you. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to our team there at Ohio University.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.